Welcome back to this third part of this segment of the law sessions relating to answering exam questions, and in particular contract exam questions. In this third segment, what we will consider, of course, is answering a misrepresentation question in contract law. Now, what we need to do here is to look at a specific question, and we will go through, in the final segment, we will look at an essay question, but we will look at another problem because generally the paper has got normally 6 questions, 5 questions, which are problem questions. So we will look at another problem question here, but I do want to make a point that sometimes examiners ignore a particular question because it comes as an essay, and I would urge you not to do that. I'll discuss that a little bit more when we get to the fourth part, but for now I want to say to you, if you have prepared for, say, misrepresentation, you should be able to respond to it whether it comes as a question or as a problem. Right. What we'll do now then is we will go back to the University of London past exam questions, and we will look at question 4 of 2011. Now, this question on misrepresentation reads like this. On his return from a holiday trekking in an Amazonian rainforest, Harry decides he wants to make a contribution to protecting the environment. He decides, therefore, that he will raise some money by selling his electric guitar. Simon sees the guitar advertised and loves the unusual purple color, but is deterred by the price, which is much higher than others he has considered buying. Harry explains that all the money raised from the sale will go to a rainforest charity. Supportive of this charitable cause, Simon buys the guitar. Shortly afterwards, Harry falls into serious financial difficulty, and rather than sending the money to the Amazonian charity, he pays off some of his credit card debt. Simon finds out and is furious, since he could have bought a similar guitar for far less money. Still short of money, Harry decides to sell his car and buy a bicycle. He advertises his car, of course, on e-sales. Andy sees the advert and sends Harry an email asking whether the car is suitable for motorway driving, since he will need to drive it on the motorway to work every day. In his reply, Harry writes that the car is a great little runner and has never broken down on the motorway. Maybe because it hasn't been on the motorway. In fact, for the last 3 months, Harry has noticed a terrible noise every time he drives above 40 miles per hour and has therefore avoided all motorway driving. Andy buys the car. After just one motorway trip, the car breaks down. He is unable to get to work, and his boss sacks him, which means terminates him, from his job. Advise Harry in respect of his liability towards Simon and Andy. Lovely question if you had prepared for misrepresentation. It had all of the bells and whistles. It was a great question for you to just get stuck in and answer it properly. Now, it said, the part of that question said, advise Harry. That should have been what you were supposed to do. So your task is to advise Harry. What you were not invited to do by the examiner was to write a treatise on misrepresentation. So what you really need to do is to start by advising Harry. Remember, the main reason you're advising him is because there are 2 persons to whom he has made sales, and those sales have been faulty. Now, the danger for the average law student is to discuss what is a misrepresentation and then speak about misrepresentation in a descriptive format, slightly applied to the facts. That, of course, would be incorrect. In fact, it would not be the route you want to go down. If it is, of course, that you look at misrep and apply it to the facts, that would be commendable. But you would not have fully answered the question if you didn't say what was the position now with Simon and Andy. The best way to have approached the problem was to logically analyze the issue, and the first issue raised was to determine whether Harry's statement was a warranty or a representation. And through an application of the case law, so you look at cases like Halbert-Simons and Buckleton, you would then be able to analyze it based on the case law. The facts in the problem seem to strongly point towards it being a representation. Now, of course, you could always argue it as a warranty, but in my view, why take the harder road when you're looking at answering a question under time conditions? The issue then is, if this statement was a representation, is the statement actionable as a misrepresentation? And you would need to discuss the elements necessary to make a representation actionable as a misrepresentation. So in particular, you would have to look at whether Harry did in fact make any false statements, or was he simply saying what his intentions were? Because if all Harry is doing is setting out his intention, then the statement is unlikely to be actionable as a misrepresentation unless Harry was stating his intention dishonestly, or he was making a contractual undertaking as to his intention. So this would have required you to examine and apply certain cases, not least the Edgington and Fitzmaurice, because this would be important in resolving the issue of the case. The next issue, of course, which is raised on the facts given, relates to the effect of Harry's statements about the car. Now, in establishing whether there was an actionable misrepresentation, the candidates sitting the exam needed to draw a distinction between statements of fact and statements which are simply mere puffs or opinion. Now, he stated that it's a great little runner and has never broken down on the motorway. Now, in relation to the second part of Harry's statement, although English law has no duty of disclosure because he said it's never been broken down on the motorway. Now, that may be true, but maybe that's because it has either never been on the motorway or it's having a hard time when it's on the motorway. But is it that he's had problems and we're told that at the 40 miles it did have, or above 40 miles an hour it had a problem? Now, even though English law does not require somebody entering into a contract to disclose unless it is certain types of good faith contract like an insurance contract, you still needed to discuss the effect of Andy's question about the car's suitability for motorway driving and whether Harry's statement, although it was true on its face and in a literal sense, was actually such to distort the truth. You would need to consider what remedies might be available to Andy, and these of course would depend to some extent upon the type of misrepresentation that you could then that the party that could then establish. Now, based on the facts of the question, it would seem that an action under Section 2.1 of the Misrepresentation Act 1967 would be the most favorable. This is particularly true because of the rule about the remoteness, as the current case law, for example, when you look at cases like Royscott and Rogerson, the current case law allows the claimant to recover all losses flowing from the misrepresentation. Now, in the examiner's report on that question, the criticism that was made by the examiner was that students made the mistake of advising Harry in relation to Simon only and appeared to ignore potential liability in relation to Andy. Now, that is a classic mistake across the board, not just contract law. It tends to be that if persons are not working on the structure, they then tend to focus maybe on the first person and then completely forget because they're rushing to move on. And so here we see that some persons, to their detriment, had advised Harry in relation to Simon, but in the Andy part of the question, it was left. Now, there was also the issue of students not knowing, they said, what was required to establish an actionable misrepresentation, and they also criticized the fact that many students wasted a lot of time by saying what the different types of misrepresentation were, or what was necessary to establish particular types of misrep without actually addressing the question, looking at the issue, and certainly what remedy would be there. Now, the point is that if you're going to answer such a question, you ought to know what are the remedies. No, what is the effect of a misrep? What is required for a misrep? What are the remedies? And then as you analyze it, these, of course, would then become clearer. The danger, as I flagged up at the beginning, is that sometimes a student prepares for a particular topic, it comes as an essay, and they're not prepared, so they then go for the next best thing, and it might be that, oh, they didn't really do misrep, but they're going to answer it. But the fact is, if you get somebody who has prepared for misrep and has done an extraordinarily good job, it may very well mean that it is certainly not, most exams are not marked on a curve in the UK, but it certainly means that the examiner feels confident that the syllabus was actually taught in full, and therefore, they may not be so sympathetic to your paper. So again, answer the question asked, and if you are in fact signed up to our premium service, then I would again ask you to contact us to request a copy of the sample answer to this particular question, which I have endeavored to complete in time conditions under 35 minutes. We will now take a short break, of course, and when we come back, we will look at the last question and how you would answer a question on mistake, and in particular, I will focus on essay questions.